Hello and welcome again to Backpage. You know, it's not often that you get to sit and talk with a genius, but I do, because today I'm visiting with Kathleen Dean Moore. She teaches at Oregon State University, but she's as exquisite a writer as I've ever run across, and she has edited, along with Michael Nelson, this anthology called Moral Ground. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jody.
This is a wonderful book. Wonderful book. This is a collection of essays from people all over the world talking about saving the world.
Moral leaders from all over the world.
Yeah.
Every continent except Antarctica.
So how did you find them all? What was the process?
We wanted to create a consensus about the moral obligation of climate change that was as strong as the scientific consensus. And so we went to our friends and asked them, who are the people in your field who have the strongest moral voices? Mm-hmm. We thought we were probably one person away from everybody we wanted. Yeah. And that turned out to be true. Yeah. And the wonderful people sent us back names and contact information for people like Desmond Tutu and James Garvey in London, Wangari Maathai. And so we contacted them all by email.
Yeah. And I bet they jumped at the chance to be in this.
They did. Many did. Many wrote new pieces for us, and those who didn't have time to write new pieces gave us some pieces that they had written for other purposes.
Well, you know, one of the things that struck me in reading all of these different essays, and you can tell I'm marked just about every one of them, is that it's time to take the idea of climate change and changing the way we do things on the earth, to the earth, out of economics and put it in morality. And that's what I think all of this does. We have a moral obligation. You know, I just saw a thing on the internet the other day that says it's alive. She's alive. Mm-hmm. She's hurting. She's finite. And you see all of these different images of the earth, but you hear breathing through the whole thing. I was like, whoa.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
We are hurting the earth. In the process, we're hurting the children. Mm-hmm. In the process, we're hurting our own prospects and our own health. In the process, we're causing the extinction of animals all around the world. It's a crisis of compassion and justice. Mm-hmm. And the violation of human rights is severe. So you can take any of these different moral approaches and find a good reason to act.
So talk to me about that, the violation of human rights.
Just suppose that we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Mm-hmm. If that's the case, and I believe that we think it is, then damaging the material basis of our life on earth is violating those rights. Mm-hmm. So how can the children live in a place with a destabilized climate? Yeah. How can we pursue happiness when we're teetering on the brink of all sorts of changes that we're going to have to learn to adapt to in terms of our food supply, in terms of disease vectors, in terms of refugees? Mm-hmm. We are creating a humanitarian crisis.
Well, you know, that so much of this book, I can feel certain people are desperation in writing, you know, like, look, these are the numbers. This is what's happened, da-da-da-da-da. And I understand that intensity and that feeling of desperation, like, you know, we got to wake up now. But the thing that struck me, like the things that you would write and various other people that I really like, is that it's also, even though we're if we haven't already passed it, we're fast approaching a tipping point. I like it that you focused it or phrased it as an opportunity to step up and get bigger spiritually than we ever thought we could, you know?
Yes.
And I think that's true. That's the way I look at it.
It's true in so many ways. And some of the reasons for acting on behalf of the earth are deeply spiritual reasons, reasons that have to do with our obligations to be stewards of divine creation, reasons having to do with our love for the world. We deeply love this world and the circumstances we live in. If that's the case, then we have an obligation to care for them. Many of the arguments are based on the appreciation of beauty. This is a beautiful world. Let's listen to it. And when you do, you realize that to ransack it is a kind of a vandalism that is just insupportable. Instead, we should be celebrating it. But the argument that I like the most that's deeply rooted in spirituality is the argument that's based on gratitude.
Yes.
The earth is a gift.
Yeah.
We didn't earn it. We don't necessarily deserve it. And if it were taken from us, there's nothing we could do to get it back.
Yeah. Well, one of the essays they talked about, I can't remember who wrote it, but he said if we were suddenly invaded by aliens and they were poisoning our water and polluting our air and you know, essentially raping the earth so we couldn't grow anything that would feed our people, we would spend everything to get rid of them. Everything. There's no way we would let them do that. And yet we're doing it ourselves. You know?
That's Derek Jensen's argument.
Yeah.
I think it's a very powerful one because it allows us to pull back a little bit and to look at all the harms that are being done. And it arouses a kind of indignation that we're allowing these things to happen to what we love so deeply, even our own prospects and the prospects of our children. I think that's a powerful argument. The American people and people around the world have been called to action many, many times in the past, often on the basis of a moral principle. American Revolution, emancipation of the slaves, civil rights movement. They haven't been economic arguments for those. They've been arguments that are based on deep belief in what is right and what's wrong. And I think that's what we're called to do now, is to recognize that what we're doing to each other and what we're doing to the least powerful among us and what we're doing to the planet is morally insupportable.
And what you're doing to future generations. I mean, your 3-year-old grandson. What kind of place is he going to grow up in? My 7-year-old granddaughter, you know, I like the idea of her dancing through life and having a wonderful place to whirl around in.
I was reading to my granddaughter. I have a 4-year-old granddaughter, and we were reading about owls. And she started to hoot, and it was so fun. We were lying in the dark, hooting like owls and laughing. And I said to myself at that point, that's it. It's over. I'm not going to do anything in my professional life that doesn't make a world that's safe for the laughter of children. And I think that's what we're all called to do. And the children take joy in this rich, beautiful world. How would they live without birdsong? How would they live without frogs and owls? How would they live without, you know, green hills? To say nothing about how would they live without abundant water, and how would they live without abundant crops? You're right. It's the children. And the thing that is so appalling about that is that the children are innocent. They haven't done anything wrong. And so the fact that they would be the ones who would bear the burden of our reckless use of the earth, that's an abomination.
Well, you know, Robin Morris Collin, she's a professor of law at Willamette University. She has an essay in here. And she and her husband, Will, wrote a 3-volume encyclopedia on sustainability.
Yes.
And I had them on the show. It's been a couple of years ago. And I asked her, I said, what's the one thing that would turn it all around? And I thought maybe she'd say, ride your bike, you know, or recycle or something. She said, the education of women. And I was like, really? And she said, think of how many things stem from that one choice, to educate women in the world. First of all, they don't produce as many children. And I know in a lot of parts of the world, people have a lot of children because they'll lose a number of children. But on the other hand, if we had clean water, they might not, you know. But the population of the United States alone doubled in 60 years. In 1948, it was 150 million people. And in 2008, it was over 3 million. I mean, can't you just hear the planet going, groaning under the weight of it all?
I can.
So
I think she's right that educating women would have a more marvelous effect. But it's also a kind of a call to women who are already educated, who aren't necessarily stepping up to the plate. And it's the women who are the mothers of these children and the women who are the grandmothers of the children who will have to live in this world, who could be the leaders of this movement, and many of them are.
Well, you know, remember I told you I had an idea?
What's your idea?
This is a good idea.
Okay.
I want you and Terry Tempest Williams and Robin Morris Collin and whoever else to start a tour. This will be a worldwide touring conference called Women Rock the World.
Nice.
And it's the double meaning of nurturing women rock the world,
very nice.
but also to empower and inspire young women like my niece Kelly and my goddaughter Dylan, who are young women who truly will rock the world, who will shake it up in such a way that we won't go down this path. that we can change it before we all tumble off into the abyss and nobody has a place to live anymore. So, there's your assignment.
I've just got back from one of those assignments. We've been on tour with this book, and we've been, I think we went to something like 50 different town hall meetings called town hall meetings. We know that it's not enough just to consult the moral leaders of the world. There are moral leaders among us everywhere you look. And we were trying to engage them in this conversation.
But see, with this, you could also engage corporate sponsorship, but it has to be, they have to show you how they operate and prove to you that they operate their, whatever, their company or corporation with sustainability in mind, you know? And then you could showcase them. I'm a promotion machine, in case
You are. Well, sign me up.
It would be a great and wonderful, fun thing to do.
It would.
Hey, if you just tuned in, I'm Jody C. and this program's Back Page, and we're visiting with Kathleen Dean Moore about her new book, Moral Ground. It's an excellent anthology collection of essays from various people about saving our beautiful planet that we live on. Do you have one or two that you'd like to read to us in here?
Well, I thought it was really quite wonderful, the poem by Gary Snyder, our California poet, who wrote this some time ago. It's called For the Children. The rising hills, the slopes of statistics lie before us, the steep climb of everything going up, up as we all go down. In the next century or the one beyond that, they say, our valley, pastures, we can meet there in peace if we make it. To climb these coming crests, one word to you and your children. Stay together. Learn the flowers. Go light.
Yeah.
That does speak, I think, perhaps to the parents. How do we serve our children? You know, we were on the road, and the one man came up to me after our talk, and he just planted his chest right in my face, and he said, I don't care about ethics. All I care about is my daughter. And I'm going to make as much money as I possibly can so that she can be safe her whole life long. And I said, oh, the irony, the absolute irony, that in our effort to give our children all these material goods, we're destroying the planet on which they'll have to make a living.
Yeah.
And then the irony is much worse when you think about how we treat children who aren't privileged children.
Yeah.
So I like what Gary has to say about the things that we need to focus our attention on. We could live differently.
What, you know, like I asked Robin Morris Collin, what's the one thing, in your opinion, what's the one thing?
I'm real surprised that Robin didn't talk to you about corporate power. Because Robin, of course, is an expert on corporation and corporate law. I think that one of the things that we need to do that's absolutely fundamental is we need to get control of our democracy again. I really think that we need to find some way to disempower those people who would destroy the earth for personal profit and who are finding ways to make it possible to do that by buying up the government and blocking regulations that would stop them.
Well, don't you think when our Supreme Court declared corporations having personhood kind of shot a big hole in everything?
It certainly did. I think you're absolutely right. And it was Derek Jensen who wrote that, you know, if corporations are people, then by definition they're sociopaths.
Well, can we not charge them with murder?
There are beautiful, wonderful,
you know?
inspiring suits just taking place in India now, where many of the big chemical companies that are doing so much harm there are being brought into human rights courts for massive violations of human rights.
Wow.
We'll see.
Pay attention, corporate America. We're coming after you.
Or at least asking that you think about the common good as you make your decisions.
Yeah. So, are you still teaching every day, or?
I don't teach every day, but I do teach every year.
Okay.
Yeah, in the philosophy department.
And then, when you're not doing that, you're doing stuff like this, and then being on a book tour.
Well, I'm writing pieces that are all about ethics and climate change. And I am giving a lot of talks around the country, trying to do what I would call moral education. How do we talk about what our obligations are?
Do you talk to corporations about it?
I have not. I've been going into the communities. I've been talking in church basements and university halls and libraries, places like that.
But you know, there are a lot of corporations. I was just thinking of like Johnson & Johnson, for example. They do a lot of public good with their money and their foundation. and I don't know what their policy is, but if you could get a huge corporation like that on board talking about climate change and ecology.
There you have another good idea.
Yeah. Hey, people ought to walk up and give me money on the street.
That's
you
true.
know?
It's true.
So-
An idea machine.
Hey, if you just tuned in, lucky for you, we're visiting with Kathleen Dean Moore about her book, Moral Ground. And I'm Jody C. This program is Backpage, so we're glad that you're joining us. Have you got a new book in the works?
I have several new books in the work, but none of them well enough developed to really talk about. I want to talk about, well, now here I'm going to talk about it.
Yeah.
I want to write some about restoring our relationship to the land. I want to talk about this little piece of dirt that we have out in the country where we're trying to restore endangered turtles, western pond turtles, and the ways in which that stands for the kind of work we need to do on Earth.
You know, in reading your book, Pine Island Paradox, which I really loved, I was struck at how your adult children are so in tune with everything. You know, I mean, clearly you and your husband have done a fabulous job raising these kids to be aware.
I'm very proud of them.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that.
What are they doing with their young lives? What kind of work do they do?
My daughter teaches architecture, and she is a specialist in the life cycle of buildings from start to finish, so that we don't build a motel, let it go for 20 years, tear it down, put all the stuff in the landfill, start over again. But so we think quite intentionally about where the energy and the materials come from and where they go in the life cycle. Because buildings have life cycles just like plants do.
Yeah.
And my son is a aquatic ecology professor up in Canada.
Why am I not surprised? And your husband, he was a teacher here. Is he still teaching here?
He's retired now,
Yeah.
and he was a biologist, and he's still very, very interested in the kind of natural history, the kind of encounters with the wild.
So what's more comfortable to you? Running around out in the field looking for this or that needs to be saved, or talking to people about it, about what to do and how close we are to extinction?
I would love to be out just sleeping under the stars. I would much rather be out walking along the river. I desperately miss that. I sometimes think, all I want to do right now is find a tree and lie down on the ground underneath it. But I don't think any of us can do that. I mean, we have to do that. We have to fill ourselves back up again every once in a while, and we have to remember our sources of strength. But we have to be out in the world. You can't love something without doing every single thing you can in the most ferocious ways you can possible to save it. And the damage that we're doing to the natural world that sustains us, spiritually sustains us, is unthinkable.
Ferocious ecology,
There you go.
Ooh, I have to remember that one. In the meantime, would you read that essay by Brian Doyle? Brian Doyle has been on our show before. He's a wonderful man. He's very funny. And he has that Cormac McCarthy style of writing where each essay is like 2 or 3 giant run-on sentences, only Brian's in a better mood. So,
Yeah, and you have to have good lungs to read Brian Doyle,
Yeah,
too,
you do,
because the
but
sentences go on.
you can pause at any
I'm
point.
certainly going to do that. Many people approached the arguments for climate action from the point of view of the consequences of not acting.
Yeah.
He approached it from the consequences of who we are as human beings.
Yeah.
And so it's a very different and very interesting approach. It's called the Newt Note, the little salamanders. One time years ago, I was shuffling with my children through the vast, wet, moist, dripping, enormous, thicketed, webbed, muddy, epic forest on the Oregon coast, which is a forest from 1 million years ago, the forest that hatched the biggest creatures that ever lived on this bruised, blessed earth. All due respect to California and its redwood trees, but our cedars and firs make them redwoods look like toothpicks. And my kids and I were in a biggest creature mood because we had found slugs way longer than bananas, and footprints of elk that must have been gobbling steroids. And a friend had just told us of finding a bear print the size of a dinner plate. And all of us had seen whales in the sea that very morning. And all of us had seen pelicans too, which look like flying pup tents. And how do they know to all hit cruise control at the same time? Does the leader give a hand signal? As my son said, and one of us had seen the 2 ginormous young eagles who lived somewhere in this forest. So when we found the biggest stump in the history of the world, as my daughter called it, we were not exactly surprised. It was basically totally understandable that suddenly there would be a stump so enormous that it was like someone had dropped a dance floor into the forest. That's the sort of thing that happens in this forest. And my kids, of course, immediately leaped up on it and started shaking their groove things and dancing themselves silly. And I was snorting with laughter until one kid, the goofiest, why we did not name this kid Goofy when we had the chance in those first few dewy minutes of life, I will never know. Well, this kid, of course, shimmed over to the edge and fell off head over tea kettle, vanishing into a mat of fern nearly as tall as me. But the reason I tell you this story is that while we were all down in the moist velvet dark of the roots of the ferns, trying to be solicitous about Goofy and see if he was busted anywhere serious, but also trying not to laugh and whisper the word doofus, one of us found a newt. Oh my God, Dad, check it out. Of course, the newt, rattled at the attention, peed on the kid who held it, and of course that led to screeching and hilarity. And of course on the way home, we saw damselflies mating, which also led to screeching and hilarity. But the point of this story isn't pee or lust, however excellent a story about pee or lust would be. It's that one day when my kids and I were shuffling through the vast, wet, moist forest, we saw so many wonders and miracles that not one of us ever forgot any of the wonders and miracles we saw, even though we saw only tiny shreds and shards of the ones that are there. And what kind of greedy, criminal, thug thieves would we be as a people and a species if we didn't spend every iota of our cash and creativity to protect and preserve a world in which kids wander around, gaping in wonder and hoping nothing else rubbery and astonishing will pee on them? You know what I mean?
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, what kind of greedy, criminal, thug thieves would we be?
I would hate to be a thug thief. Thief. So how long did it take you to put all of this together?
It was about a 2-year project.
And how did you choose the people or the essays? Did you get essays that you thought, not going to work, not as good as I thought?
We went after essays from really wonderful writers, and there was nothing that we turned away as a result. We worked with some people. Some we worked with harder than others. We wanted a balance of people. We wanted writers, we wanted theologians, we wanted religious people, we wanted scientists, we wanted philosophers, we wanted people from all different ethnicities and all around the globe. We wanted there to be every perspective that we could imagine represented in this book, so that no matter what worldview you bring to the book, you'll come away with something that speaks to you.
Yeah. Well, you know, actually, would you read the introduction, the foreword by Desmond Tutu?
Yeah.
Because I saw him, he was on Oprah's show one time, and he's such a gentle, articulate little
Isn't he
man,
wonderful?
You know, it's
Yeah.
just, and he said, I think that the world will not change until the women have a revolution like
There
that.
we go again.
And Oprah went, well, all right.
Bring it on.
And I thought, oh boy. Anyway, if you'd read that, because it was really, really moving. And he's such a delightful little man.
He's a wonderful man, and what a gift this is.
Yeah.
I wish I could read the way he reads. To the people of all the world, the essays in this book tell us the moral ground we stand on. They are a clear call to action. We are called to understand that climate change is a moral challenge, not simply an economic or technological problem. We are called to honor our duties of justice, to prevent the enormities of climate change, as the price of the lifestyles of the privileged is paid by millions of poor people in the loss of their livelihoods and their lives. We are called to honor our duties of compassion, to prevent the suffering of millions of innocent people, especially the hungry children. Leading environmental scientists predict that as many as 185 million Africans will die this century as a direct result of climate change. Many more will face untold suffering in other parts of the world. As I write, famine is increasing. Flooding is increasing, as are the disease and insecurity caused by water scarcity around the world. Climate change is real. It has begun. The countries that are the least responsible for causing climate change are paying the heaviest price. The average UK citizen produces nearly 50 times as much carbon dioxide as any citizen in the developing world. And in the United States, the production of carbon dioxide is significantly higher. This is a serious injustice. As an African, I urgently call on ordinary people in rich countries to act as global citizens, not as isolated consumers. We must listen to our consciences, not to governments who speak only about economic markets. These markets will cease to exist if climate change is allowed to develop into climate chaos. We have a big problem to solve. Climate change is a global threat that will affect my generation surely, but will prove to have a devastating effect on my children, not to mention my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. All scientific prognoses show that the continent of Africa will be severely harmed if we do not act now. The consequences will be conflicts and instability, which we must avoid at any price. Our experience in South Africa confirms that if we act on the side of justice, we have the power to turn tides. Industry, government, civil society, and you and I, we can all make a difference. Raise your voice. I urge you, brothers and sisters, to work together with campaigners in the Global South and call for strong climate change laws in your own countries in the North, as well as internationally. Do not fly in the face of the poor by allowing the emissions produced by endless and unnecessary business flights to keep growing. Insist on an 80% cut in your national emissions and hold your governments to account. In matters of climate change, as in all our lives, our obligation is clear. We must do unto others as we would wish them to do unto us. Thank you for caring. Thank you for acting.
Well, we're going to have to wrap it up, but thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jody C. This is Backpage, and we've been talking with Kathleen Dean Moore about her book, Moral Ground. Where can people get this book?
Everywhere.
Everywhere. So look on the park bench, at the bus stop, in the grocery store.
In your independent bookseller.
At your independent booksellers. Yes, please do support independent booksellers. We want everybody to do well, but we especially want to send our business to the independent booksellers because they work really hard. The profit margin is very small, and we want them to stay in business. So, Kathleen, thank you so much for this.
Thank you
You
very
know, we
much
could
for
sit and
inviting
talk
me.
about this, and now you've got your assignment
I have
from me.
all my assignments from you.
Anyway, I'm Jody C. This is Backpage. Please be sure and join us again next time as we take another peek at the back page. And remember, we're all in this together. More the same than different. Do your best. She does.